Okay, let's try this one more time. This is
Okay.
Discovering Dyslexia. We are live with Faith Borkowsky. I'll show your book one more time. Failing Students or Failing Schools, A Parent's Guide to Reading Instruction and Intervention. If you haven't picked it up yet, please pick up this book. And you are the owner of High Five Literacy, correct?
Yes, I am.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm sorry for all the technical issues. I will apologize formally.
Don't worry about it. It's fine. It happens. It's really okay.
Your book was absolutely an amazing read and was so very informative. And you did a post, I think it was yesterday, it might have been today, where you said, I was a dys teacher. So what was the catalyst that inspired you to learn more about reading? Specifically because you called yourself a dys teacher. What made you take that transition into becoming a reading and literary specialist?
So I started off as a classroom teacher, and I had an elementary education degree and a special education degree. I was only 21 years old when I started teaching, and I learned whole language in college. So that's what I was taught. That's what I thought worked. I really was under the impression that learning was by osmosis, and children would just learn to read if I filled my room with books and lots of read alouds. And that's what I was told would happen, but it didn't work. So, my headphone dropped. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry. So I thought that if I did all these things, children would read. So I had to go for my master's, and I decided that I wanted to get a master's in reading so I could actually see a difference when I would teach children to read. And unfortunately, the master's in reading didn't really help that much. In certain areas, it did, but certainly not helping me in how to teach children to read. So here I was, I got a job as a reading specialist in the public schools, and I still felt I wasn't reaching my most needy students. It just wasn't working. So I was always on the hunt for how to help children. So I was in a bookstore on Long Island. Now let's fast forward many years later. So this did not happen until I was already teaching for almost 15 years. And I saw this book on the bookshelf in a bookstore called Book Review. And it was Why Our Children Can't Read and What We Can Do About It by Diane McGinnis.
Oh, wow.
And it literally fell into my arms. So I said, the universe is talking to me. I had to buy it. And it was the most amazing read. And I realized that, this really wasn't me. And I just needed to learn. So at that point, I made it my business to find out everything I could because I wasn't satisfied with what I knew. And I started to go for training. And my first training was in phonographics. I went to Washington, D.C. And then I was trained in Orton Gillingham, which is a bit of a different approach. It didn't matter. Both were explicit, structured ideas in how to get children to read. It just goes in through a different way. Phonographics is more of a speech to print. OG was more of print to speech. It's just a little bit of a different approach. However, I felt at that point that, all right, I need to really get the message out. So I became a reading coach, a regional reading coach, where I would go into schools. Mm-hmm. And this was during NCLB, No Child Left Behind. It was the perfect time when this research was out. Mm-hmm. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to get this message out. Unfortunately, it is very hard to change what people want to hold on to. Mm-hmm. And there goes the other ear. Maybe I should just hold this in my ears. Give me 1 second.
No worries.
This goes along with how things are going.
Well, it took me 45 minutes to get the internet to cooperate. So yeah, it just goes with it.
Right, goes with everything. So yes, it was very difficult. I assumed once people would just know the research, they would embrace it. And it wasn't that easy. Mm-hmm. It really takes some people who really want to learn, people who want to take this on, and those who didn't want it really rejected all the ideas, even though the research has been around.
And No Child Left Behind, if memory serves, was after the reading panel, which Dr. Sally Shaywitz was a member of, and all of the research that came out of the reading panel just seems to be ignored.
Well, I could tell you that I was part of Reading First.
Okay.
And we tried to get that research out there. And when schools took on the Reading First grant, that was a way of bringing research-based instruction to schools that really needed it, the targeted schools. We would do professional development in the schools. We would get our own professional development in evidence-based instruction. And although phonics was brought into the schools more than they ever had it before, they would still wanted to hold on to their old ways. So it was really about not throwing the baby out with the bathwater mentality. Felt like, okay, maybe this helps, but we want to hold on to our level books and what we know. And it was very difficult. Some teachers embraced it wholeheartedly. Many appeared like they were taking it on, but then when the door closed, they were doing their own thing. So it was really a mixed bag.
I see that. Can you describe, you talk a lot in your blog and in your book about balanced literacy. Can you describe balanced literacy and why this is an ineffective methodology for teaching reading?
Mm-hmm. Well, just like I said before, the balance is bringing in phonics, some phonemic awareness, but it's not balanced, it's imbalanced. It leans in the direction of using level books, whole language strategies, which really is about surrounding a room with books and lots of interesting stories and giving children a love of reading, which is all important. So I'm not saying that piece is not important, but that's not going to get young children necessarily reading. And especially children who are dyslexic. It doesn't work for them. And it doesn't work for a lot of kids. So it's unfortunate, but when you hold on to more of that type of teaching and you only give a little bit of a sprinkling of phonics, it's not going to work. It really, and that's what has been tried at this point, where schools said, all right, we need to bring in phonics. So we have now a balanced approach, but really it's whole language. And it's just another term for whole language. Right. And it was a way at the time of settling the reading wars. So we're not going to fight with you. All right, we'll do this. You give a little, we'll give a little. Let's call it a balance. We'll call it a day. And that really was how the term came into being. It was whole language, but then people were fighting, and they actually called it the reading wars. And it was a way to settle that by calling it balanced literacy. And so it covers everyone. Well, we're doing a balance of everything, but what happens is it negates the idea of phonics being important, because when you put kids in leveled books, they don't have to use their skills in decoding to read. They can use the pictures. They use predictable text. And there's no reason for them to practice the skills that they're learning.
Yeah. And I know that my dyslexic son is definitely a victim of balanced literacy. And one of the things I love so much about your book was, not having an education degree and being the parent in the classroom, observing what the issues were, not having the language to be able to put the terms with things and make those connections. That was one of the most powerful things about your book to me. Was I was sitting there, I can introduce you to my husband at one point. He's going to tell you that he constantly heard me screaming the word yes while I was reading your book.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's great. Well, honestly, Ashley, I wrote it for you, for parents, and of course, teachers and administrators. But I really wanted anyone, regardless of their background, to be able to pick it up and connect to it. I wanted it to be accessible. And that's what I'm told, that it really is easy to read. It's a comfortable read, and it's common sense. And that's what I wanted it to be, really. I'm proud of that. And I'm really happy that you're saying that, because then I did my job. I wanted it to be for everyone. We have enough books out there where they talk edubabble. So and I don't mean that we need that piece.
Right.
And I certainly could understand the edubabble, but that's really used as a way to intimidate people, I think. And that's part of why I think it's important for parents to know the truth. There's a lot of nonsense. And then when the talk is over their heads, they feel intimidated. So I wanted this book to be down to earth and practical. So I'm really happy you're saying that.
And everything you've said is absolutely correct. I mean, I'm an avid reader, but once I had a child, I don't find that I have a whole lot of time to read. And I found your book very easy to read, and I appreciated that, because, by the time that you, or at least I don't know about every parent out there, but by the time I have time to sit down and read a book, I've just put him to bed, and I don't have a whole lot of time before I fall asleep myself.
Yeah.
And I would stay up and just keep reading and reading. And my husband would look at me around midnight and go, "Are you going to stop reading anytime soon?"
Oh, that's amazing. That's wonderful. I'm actually going to announce soon an audio book. I'm waiting. I talked to the publisher, and we are going to have an audio version of the book out any day now. I was hoping it would have been out by this interview, but it's delayed. I guess it's just the way things go, and we just have to roll with it. But I will be announcing it on Facebook. It'll be on Audible. So for people like you who are busy and need to be able to kind of do things and listen, that will be an option.
That'll be an amazing option. I know so many in our community, even other dyslexic parents, who are really looking forward to that. So thank you for telling us about that. That's amazing.
Great, thank you.
So we've been talking about balanced literacy and whole language, and in your book, you really talk about the inequality in the educational establishment where biphonics instruction has really been pushed aside.
Mm-hmm.
And edubabble, as you were just discussing, is so. I even wrote about that recently myself. Such a difficult thing for parents to be able to overcome when they're trying to advocate for their children. What, in your opinion, can we do as parents and as a society to bring back science-based reading methodologies into our school? And how can we contribute to this? How can we fight the educational establishment in order to go where we need to go with reading instruction?
All right, so I got myself into a little bit of hot water with, but it's okay. It's all right. With the blog I wrote for you, with some people, most people loved it.
It's amazing.
Thank you. But certainly there are people who want to hold on to the dyslexia piece to the point where I think it does the group harm rather than helping. And let me explain what I mean by that. Here we go again. Okay. I'm left-handed. Mm-hmm. So I'm part of the 10%. Mm-hmm. No one cares that I'm left-handed.
Right.
So I could yell and scream, say left-handedness, say left-handedness. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm not making light of this. I don't want to insult anyone. What I'm trying to do is bring a point of view out that I think is missing from all of this.
Okay.
So no one cares about me being left-handed. No one cares that it's hard for me to open jars. No one cares that it's hard for me to cut with a scissors. No one cares that I smudge ink across the paper when I write. No one cares that spiral notebooks bother me. Now, there are going to be people who will change those things to make it better for left-handed people. Mm-hmm. But in the scope of things, the majority of people are not affected by a left-handed world because it really is just the 10%.
Right.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is we need to try to broaden the focus. Mm-hmm. And so when I used, this should be called really Dyslexia Awareness Month, obviously it was said as a way to get attention. Dyslexia is real. I want to make that clear. I am not minimizing dyslexia. I am not saying that we shouldn't acknowledge dyslexia. Certainly there should be an awareness of dyslexia. But if you want to make change in a public school, we need to look at instruction. This needs to be, instead of dyslexia being a narrow focus, it should be, hey, wait a minute, this is dyslexia going on. Mm-hmm. Instead of saying, well, let's pay attention to learning disabilities, let's pay attention to curriculum disabilities. Mm-hmm. Instead of it being failing students, the title of the book, it should be failing schools. And that the attention really needs to be on why do we have so many children who can't read? They're not all dyslexic.
Right.
And by improving everyone's chances of learning to read better and spelling better and writing better, because there is explicit structured literacy, you're not going to get where you want to be. So you can have a phonics check, which I believe in. Again, I'll be attacked if I said something about the phonics check, which I completely believe in. You can have decodable books in schools. Yay for getting decodable books in some places. Fabulous. But unless you start appealing to the emotional, personal connection of the majority, that's what I'm saying. You must appeal to the majority. And then if they think, oh, wait a minute, my kid might be at risk unless things change. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, wow, this school is going under because of the instruction. There are very good schools and good districts because people have money. Guess what? All those people are getting tutors for their children, like me. That's what happens. That's the reality.
Right.
And then the schools will pat themselves on the back. We're at the top of the heap. We're fabulous. And yet, that's the dirty little secret that's going on here.
Right.
So I think if the dyslexia groups want to really, really make a difference, and they'll say that they are looking at getting all these things in, and they are. Bravo to them. They're doing an amazing job. You're doing an amazing job. I'm not saying that they're not doing an amazing job. But I think so much attention is put on to remediation that that's what our society is. We remediate, we wait to intervene instead of saying, wait a minute, let's take 10 steps back. Tier 1 instruction is failing over 60% of the children. That's where the focus, I believe, should be. So it's not a question of that, you know, the decoding dyslexia or discovering dyslexia or say dyslexia, or any of that is wrong. We need people standing there yelling and screaming and saying, this is what needs to happen, for sure. But you need to appeal to everybody. So getting back to my left-handed example, the way to teach me as a left-handed person is break it down, be very explicit, and give me lots and lots of practice. When I wanted to be a twirler, and I'll make this brief, I had to learn at first to twirl with my right hand, not my left hand. Now, I didn't tell the whole team, well, you have to make accommodations for me because I'm left-handed. You twirl with both your hands. But in order to learn, everybody starts off on the right hand. Well, guess what, Ashley? Most people were just watching the girl who was showing us, and they were able to pick it up. I couldn't. I needed somebody to tell me how exactly to move my wrist in which direction, how to stir that pot slowly. And then I went home and I practiced again and again and again and again. And you know what? I ended up where I was able to do it better than a lot of the other people, because when they had to use their left hands to twirl, guess who already could do it? So the point is, explicit, structured approach is what works for everyone. Some might need it a little bit longer. Some might need to break it down further. But that's my way. That's the analogy I could think of to make people understand that if you only focus on the minority, the majority will not care.
Right, and they're still left behind. They're still struggling.
That's right.
Because we do have a literacy crisis in this country.
Yes.
I have a friend here who she and I exchanged some words at one. I love her to death, absolutely love her to death. She and I exchanged some words at one point because she said we were creating dyslexia, and I said no, we're not creating dyslexia. We're creating an illiteracy crisis because not all children will learn to read through a balanced literacy approach. I said, but you can't take away from dyslexia itself by naming children that are normative, if you will, but are not going to learn via that method. You can't take away from the dyslexic message. I said both are equally important, but we need a structured literacy program for all if we're going to solve the literacy crisis in our country.
That's right. That's right.
So how, with everything that you've said, how would you recommend inspiring our teachers? And I know that this kind of goes to the universities too, and maybe we have to start with the teachers to get to the universities. I'm not sure. How would you recommend inspiring teachers to embrace educating themselves on why balanced literacy, whole language cannot and will not work for our children?
I think first, teachers need to know, hey, it's not your fault. The same way I had that epiphany, it's not my fault. So this is not teacher bashing.
Right.
You know, the tone is not about teacher bashing.
Right.
Really, the word here is teach. We need to focus on what we're teaching, the instructional component, because otherwise we'll have instructional casualties. And if we want to teach as many children as we can right from the start, we have to change the approach. And I think if teachers stepped away and realized, hey, I'm not being as effective as I could be, many of them would want to learn. There are going to be some who don't. That's the reality.
Right.
Especially teachers who are ready to retire. Many of them, I'm not saying all, but many of them might feel, why do I have to do this when I have a year or two left before I'm out the door?
Right.
Some of them are learners. They've always been learners. They would want to just improve because they like this. But many of them are very much set in their ways. Even some younger teachers who feel like, I know, this is what I was told, I know, they are going to be closed to this. But I think that if you let teachers know that this really is an instructional issue, it's not a personal issue. That's why I put that post up. I was a DIS teacher. I'm saying when I started, I was a victim of dyslexia.
Yeah.
I chose to change. I wanted to change. I made it my business to learn what I could. Right now, there's no excuse that people don't have the information. It's out there. It's there. The universities are really at fault here. They're allowing teachers to finish college without knowing any of this. I taught a graduate course. So they didn't get this in undergrad. And I taught an early literacy 2 class. This was a special ed early childhood master's program. They did not know what phonemic awareness was. They never even heard of the term.
Yeah.
How is that possible? And that just happened. So it's not like it happened a long time ago.
Right.
This is happening now. They're finishing school without having the tools. And it's unfortunate. But the only way we're going to make change really is by saying this is an instructional issue. Now, going back to dyslexia, since it does exist and since it is real, if we had the best instruction in the schools, if children got explicit structured literacy from the start, it can mitigate or eliminate reading problems, where if they were taught early on, K-2 this way, without any other layering, without any other interference, we could have most kids reading, and then only 3% of a school, 3%, which is where the numbers really should fall, quite honestly. It should not even be at 20%. Really, because there are children who are predisposed to dyslexia, to having reading problems. It is there. It is definitely genetic. It's neurobiological, but with the right instruction, we can mitigate or eliminate these problems. And that's what schools need to know, that it really is an instructional problem.
Right. No, definitely agree. Just taking into account my own child, and when he hit the wall at the end of first grade, unable to read at all, and with all of the remediation that he receives, both privately and inside of the school itself, how if he was getting that as part of his regular day-to-day instruction in his class, how beneficial that would be. I don't know that we would be needing to do all of the remediation that we're doing, but we have to do all of this remediation because of he's not taught to read.
Yes.
Because he's in a balanced literacy environment where, other than some phonic pictures on the wall in kindergarten, I don't know that he's ever been given phonics instruction inside of a classroom.
Yes.
And he's in fourth grade now.
Right. And that's, I put that up, that Jack Fletcher basically said, it's more of a slogan than a practice. It's more of a slogan than a practice. And I think that's important to keep in mind. And again, I'm talking holistically. Obviously, there are some schools doing it right. There are some teachers doing it right, lots of teachers doing it right. But we're talking about a societal problem now. And so there must be lots of schools not doing it right.
Right.
Right. So let's look at it that way. No one should personalize this.
Right.
This is really a problem that we have to address by looking at the numbers. That really tells it all. When you see this many children not meeting grade level proficiency, it's an instructional problem at the tier 1 level. The core instruction is a problem. Agree.
Completely. 100% agree. I only have a couple more minutes. So we've talked about so much. This has been absolutely amazing. I did want to ask you one last question though, which was, how would you, given the state of things within our educational system, given that it is a balanced literacy environment, what would your advice be to a parent like me who's trying to navigate a public education system with a dyslexic child?
Right. Well, I think it's hard because you are fighting an uphill battle.
Yep.
You're fighting an uphill battle. At this point, it looks like things are getting better, obviously through awareness and through organizations like yours and Decoding Dyslexia and all of the people who are bringing our attention to dyslexia. It does get better, but in order to really fight this uphill battle, you need to give teachers, other parents, administrators, community school board members, politicians an understanding of the reading process. That's why I wrote my book. And I really wanted to be the impetus for change. The whole point is to give people a common language for instruction. Right now, we're talking two different languages. The language that your child needs as a dyslexic child, and the language that the schools think everybody else needs.
Right.
And what their language is, that reading is meaning, and it is, by the way, again, somebody will say reading is not meaning, so they're going to take my words and twist it. But of course, reading is meaning. That's the most ridiculous thing I ever heard. That's the whole point of reading. But you don't start with that. You start teaching children how to read, bottom up, in a structured approach. And you won't have all the problems that you see. And that should be the message. And until we could start talking to other people with a common language, you'll be saying one thing, they'll be saying something else. I really hope that my book goes further than just dyslexic parents. I purposely did not put dyslexia in the title because I want it to be read by parents who have young children, emergent readers. Let them know when their child is 3 years old, hey, I want to make sure that my child is getting the right instruction.
Right.
And I've had people say, oh, I wish I read this when my child was younger. I wish I would have known. So I want it to be for parents with preschoolers. I want it to be for parents who have dyslexia in their families or learning disabilities. I want the book to be widespread to give people a common language.
Right. Well, and I know I personally I recommend it to everybody that I know. You don't just have to have a dyslexic child. I think everybody needs to be reading, because I definitely did pick that up, that it wasn't just for the community that I live and breathe in. It's for, you did truly mean this for all parents. And that was part of what was so brilliant about it, was I think that every parent can relate to what you were talking about within the book.
Thank you.
Thank you for writing it.
Oh, thank you. You know something? It was a labor of love, to be honest. The book was written out of entries from a journal. I kid you not, that book was in the making for years, because that's my way of getting my feelings out. I write it down. So I actually put up a post lately. A friend of mine who is a dyslexia, a parent advocate, by the way, not a dyslexia, parent advocate, Danielle Brooks, if you're out there, she put up a post of Kermit typing. And it's, basically it was about the idea that this is how you get your feelings out. And I said, boy, Kermit and I have a lot in common. And I just saw that. I said, yeah, that's me. Just, I have to write. I have to get my feelings out. And that's what I did over the years. So when I wrote the book, I went back through years of journal entries so that I would remember these things. And then, of course, I use analogy to connect with people so they understand more complicated concepts in an easy to understand way.
Right. No, and I know the Kermit thing. I think you posted it recently, and I think you were the person I stole it from and posted it on my own.
That's right. That's right. From one Kermit to another Kermit.
Because I had sent a very hate-filled yet polite email earlier that day.
Yes.
Unfortunately, it's what it's. But I love that image. It was so appropriate for me as well.
Yes, it was perfect. And that's what I'm hoping, that basically this is an honest account. And I'm proud of that too, when people read it, they say, wow, finally someone who's telling the truth. Because originally the title of my book was Reading Intervention Behind School Walls. I wanted people to understand that here I am writing it from the outside, but I was an insider. And so I definitely I sat in on CSE meetings. I saw what went on in the classroom as a coach. And in speaking to so many parents, I could relate on both sides. And I wanted it to be read by everyone. And no one should take anything personally. No. It's not a personal indictment of anybody. It is something that we need to come to terms with and get real and be honest about. So I hope anyone who is in charge of any of these types of organizations really will see that when I say something like dyslexia, that I am not by any way going against the word dyslexia by really focusing on instruction. I just feel that the focus needs to be broadened a bit.
Definitely agree. Thank you so much for writing your book, and thank you so much for, first, your patience with significant internet issues.
It's okay.
And then with taking the time to speak with me today. I've enjoyed this immensely, and I think that the followers that we have within our Discovering Dyslexia community will definitely enjoy and learn so much from watching this video. And I'm going to hold it up one more time. If I can do it right. It's a mirror image, so it confuses me. Here's Facebook. Everybody, please go buy Facebook. This is amazing. It will change your life. I know it changed mine.
Thank you so much, Ashley.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good rest of the day. All right.
You too.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.